You are listening to Real Foot Forward, a West Tennessee podcast. This week's episode is made possible by ATA. Visit atacpa.net to learn more about the services they offer for individuals and organizations. ATA, your long-term accounting partner. Today's guest is Mayor Jake Bynum of Weakley County, Tennessee.
And this is Scott Williams, the host of Real Foot Forward, where every single week we talk about the history, the people, and the culture of our home here in West Tennessee. I got a really special guest here on the podcast today. We've got Mr. Jake Bynum, who is the county mayor of Martin, Tennessee, right down the road. And when he was elected, he was the youngest county mayor and the first millennial mayor ever elected in Tennessee. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks, Scott. It's the Weakley County mayor.
What did I say?
You said Martin, which is okay. Martin's in Weakley County. So
okay. See, so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk a little bit about what people don't know about city and county government in rural communities. So I just made the perfect example of that. I know you're the perfect person to give us a primer on this. In West Tennessee, there are hundreds of little cities and counties and towns and villages, and so we're gonna get you to give us a little primer. But before we get to that, back us up to little Jake. And where'd you grow up? What was your life like? What made you, and at what point did you decide to become a city leader?
So little Jake, one of the things I talk about to a lot of people is that this is either the most fascinating thing about or worst thing about me, in the fact that I have lived and worked in Weakley County my entire life. So born and raised here, went to high school, product of the local school system here in Weakley County, then went right over to UT Martin and got a 4-year degree from them, and then went to work for what was First State Bank, now Simmons Bank, straight out of college, basically because those were the only people that offered me a job. And so that's the reason I went to work for them, but offered me an opportunity in my local hometown market. And so from there, went straight into the role that I'm currently in as county mayor since 2014. But little Jake, like I said, grew up right here in Weakley County, in Dresden. So that's really what home is to me. I went to school all through elementary, middle, and high school in Dresden. And then, like I said, graduated, went to Martin, spent 4 great years over there. Met my wife after I had left Martin, but while she was still at Martin. She's originally from Dover. And so we met and had 2 of the cutest kids that you've ever met in your entire life, who are now 10 and 8 years old. Alyssa and I have been married just a hair over 10 years. And she's a school teacher at the local elementary school here where my kids go to school. And so, like I said, got into politics. I was on the city board for 1 term in Dresden. Did that from 2008 to 2012. And that's kind of where, I won't say that's where the bug kind of bit me. Politics was already something I was kind of involved in and interested in. My family's had a long history in politics, not necessarily in public office, but in public service. And so kind of grew up in the business, and then saw an opportunity when I had a discussion with my predecessor, Houston Patrick, who, interestingly enough, Scott, you mentioned that when I was elected, I was the youngest county mayor in the state. He was the second oldest county mayor in the state when he left office. He was 80 when he retired. And so, yeah, absolutely. My assistant, who was his assistant, kind of had a rude awakening. I tell people we went from an apple a day keeps the doctor away to an Apple operating system in a matter of 24 hours. And so that was a new kind of event for her. But he was sort of talking about retiring, and we saw a need in the community for new and fresh ideas. And so just kind of took a leap, almost a leap of faith, and said, like, we're going to try and do this, and now's a great opportunity and time to do it while there's a vacancy. And so have been doing that for now the last 6 years. And I tell people every day, I've got the greatest job in the world. Can't imagine doing anything different today.
So for people who get their entire civic education from watching reruns of Parks and Recreation, the TV show, what exactly do you do in your job?
Yeah, so that's a great question. One of the questions that we got most often when we ran that first time is, what is the county mayor and what do they do? County government is very different from state government or from city government in the fact that there are not all these departments that sort of roll up into the county mayor. So when you think about county government, you think about the county mayor, the sheriff, the county clerk, the trustee, the register of deeds, property assessor, all of those sort of offices. All of them are independently elected. Road supervisors are another one of those, independently elected. And so they don't answer to me; they answer to their constituents because they're elected. And so where city government has kind of all these departments, where you've got police and fire and parks and those sort of things, where they kind of all are under the umbrella of the mayor and the city board. We both have legislative bodies where counties have county commissions, cities have city boards, and that is somewhat of the same kind of thing. State law requires that county commissions have a maximum or a minimum number of people, where cities that's left up to them and their own charters. And so there's some real differences in the way that county government and city government work. But as far as the county mayor position is concerned, day-to-day operations look and they can look different depending on what county that you look at. But typically, the county mayor is going to be involved in the overall kind of finance part of the county, whether that's directly or indirectly related. But then I tell people my number one job is kind of the salesman of the county. It's my responsibility to go out and kind of sell the county, whether that's through economic development, opportunities, prospects, community events, looking to recruit people into the community, going out and telling people how great Weakley County is so that they make some sort of investment. That's kind of my job and what I do day to day and how we kind of look at it. And sometimes that even looks like we're selling the county to those people that live right here inside of our bounds. So we've got, X, Y, or Z project going on, and this is why we think that it's beneficial for the county moving forward, but most importantly for the constituency.
So how do you handle the fact that there are people that you serve that live in the county that don't want things to change at all? They want them to stay exactly as they were 5 years ago.
Yeah, so there's certainly this balancing act of how do you continue to progress and make this a place that people want to live here both today and in the future, while also honoring those people that have made that investment over the last several years. And so that's what part of what we do on a day-to-day basis is look at kind of where are we today and what makes the most sense. We've got a fantastic road system here in the county. We've got a pretty large road system here. Every single road, with the exception of about 3, are paved here in Weakley County, whether that's tar and chip or blacktop. That was a great investment at the time. Now looking back, it takes an extreme amount of money to maintain that road system. I congratulate our forefathers for making that investment, but what that has done is that's created a standard that now people expect that we sometimes have a hard time maintaining. And so some of those things are decisions that we look at of like, what is the most advantageous way to move forward? One of those things that we're especially looking at right now is that broadband piece to infrastructure and how important that is. And so we know that there's an importance to broadband. We know that to live and to work and to learn, right at your home is really important to people, especially outside the municipal bounds of communities. And so how do you do that in a way that both you providing service for the citizens that live here while also providing infrastructure for potential citizens that may look to either stay or live here in the future, but also doing that in a cost-effective way, because broadband expansion is not inexpensive. It's actually very expensive, but also very much needed, and also needed to be done properly. And so putting in fiber is one of those things that I've been really passionate about for the last 5 years, in a way to do that, especially for those rural citizens. And there are some people that say, like, I don't need internet at my house, but overwhelmingly, the majority do. And sometimes you have to make decisions based on the majority, even though there is a group of citizens out there that says, like, I'm not interested in that, and I don't think we should be doing that. Really, what is best for the greater good and for the largest?
You would think now more than ever, there's been an example of why broadband is so important for those kids who are having to go to school at their house. If they don't have good internet access, they have to drive into town.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've seen, especially since we went back to school, and first, let me say, like, I understand that in person, in classroom learning is the most beneficial to a student's success. There's no question about that. You can see the data on that every single day, all day long. The thing that we know, though, is that there are parents that are not comfortable sending their student to the classroom, that they are looking at other opportunities or ways to educate their child. They're uncertain about what kind of the future is in its present state. And so we have about 10% of our student population that is learning remotely through our local school system. And so, right, we saw that in March, but at the time we were unsure and we were just trying to hobble along like all the other counties across the state were doing. But once we started back, and kind of had a plan for both in classroom and virtual learning at the beginning of the school year, it really was like, this is important. This is what we've got to do. And asking a parent or a student to drive into town to McDonald's and sit out in the parking lot is just not a solution for the long term. And I think most importantly, what we're seeing and why it's so important is that this will be opportunities that people probably will take advantage of in the future. That it may be a demand to say, like, I'm not interested necessarily in in-class learning, but I do want to get the benefits of a local school system. And so is there an opportunity for us moving forward to offer curriculum outside the classroom while also keeping that student as a Weakley County school system student?
Well, and I think more and more, in addition to education and students, colleges, work, we're all going to be Zooming, as I think we've discovered that Zooming is not horrible. And I think there'll be more of that. For our podcast, we used to, ask people to come in personally and record it so the sound would be perfect. Now, we've discovered that Zoom does work, and it would work even better if everybody had really good internet access. So, talk me through, I know that, you're the cheerleader for Martin. Talk me through how do you, or how does someone in a position like yours go through change, like all the change going on in Martin, in the town square, the library. I was just there last night, and the library is under construction. When I heard there was going to be a library, I just pictured a little library. I didn't picture, what is really going to be an anchor of the town. That projects like that have got to be difficult to navigate through the political system. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So first, I should mention that because that's a city project, there is kind of just this piece that we don't deal with on a day-to-day basis. So the funding of that certainly is not a piece that we had to deal with. That's really a Martin piece. But there is this support aspect of it that the county is kind of responsible for, not just for Martin, but for, like you mentioned, all of those communities inside inside Weakley County. So whether that's this project that's going on in Dresden, or this project that's going on in Sharon, or these great big projects that typically happen in Martin, just because of the nature of the municipality. So how does the county navigate being supportive of those projects? How does the county sort of backfill that support? So interestingly enough, counties do put some funding in all of the local libraries, whether that's a county library like we have here in Dresden, or whether that's the city libraries like in Gleason, Sharon, Greenfield, and Martin. We put a little money in there just as a requirement by the state. But the other piece of that is like, how do you go out and how do you have conversations with people to say, like, while that's not necessarily my project, this is why this is a good project, not just for the city of Martin, but this is a great project for the community as a whole. And so that's a really interesting piece of how do you navigate all those communities, because every single thing that happens in a community is important to that community. And so while Dresden may be really invested in their Iris Festival, and Martin may be really invested in their Soybean Festival. Somebody in Gleason may not be necessarily invested in either one of those, but there's something in their community that they are invested in. And so trying to sort of bring those groups together, have a conversation around what is good for one is good for all, and that gets really complicated. That's certainly complicated in the community development piece, but typically, communities understand, like, I do have the money to do this in my community. I don't necessarily have the money to do this in my community. You're not going to see the same kind of library in Sharon that you see in Martin. Where it does get a little complicated is that economic development piece of it, because everybody wants jobs in their community. And they think that it's really important to do that work. And it is. The thing that we look at from a county-wide standpoint is when a business looks at us, an industry looks at us and says, I want to locate in Weakley County, we've got to do our work to say, like, this is the best place to do that for various different reasons. Because Martin has a spec building available, or Dresden has land available, or you need ball clay in your operation, and so Gleason is the place to go. Greenfield's on, a couple of different high functioning rails. All of those pieces are pieces that we have to look at from a countywide standpoint, but then also go out and say, we made this investment for the good of the greater community and the entire county.
And you mentioned communication to your constituents. You're a millennial mayor who has access to and uses social media. Probably your predecessor was not tweeting a lot, probably wasn't posting on Facebook. What do you see as the role in social media, both good and bad, in your job?
Yeah, so certainly it's positives and negatives. I think we see that more and more every single day. One of the things that we realized really quickly is you've got to touch people where they are. And so we have to use kind of everything that's at our disposal. So sometimes we do that really effectively. Sometimes we wish we did it more effectively. But we are doing Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, while also doing all of the traditional media as well. So radio and newspaper, and those sort of things. And then we are a firm believer still in Weakley County of kind of in person, that the best thing to do is to communicate the opportunities that are out there, and then have those discussions in an in-person setting. Again, that is kind of one of the things that I think I do really well, is kind of have a conversation with people. And so we think that that's really important. But obviously, Facebook and social media in general has its disadvantages. I mean, people now have the liberty to go out and say anything and everything they want to, without any sort of filter, basically. Both a filter of, is it nice to say? That's my number one thing is like, really and truly, I'm not going to say anything disparaging about anybody on Facebook or Twitter. I'm not going to try to anyways. That's my goal. But then the other piece of that is then is it accurate? And that's really where we struggle on a day-to-day operation is what is accurate information to get out there and to share.
So you're leading in an era where there's a lot of dissension on, two different sides, maybe multiple sides. You're dealing with a pandemic in which nobody can really agree on things, and there's a huge amount of racial strife, and there's a lot going on. What skills are you using as a leader that you didn't anticipate?
Yeah, so obviously, not everything is COVID related and deals with the pandemic, but certainly what we've seen even around this systematic racism and inequality and those sort of points, while they were in existence prior to the pandemic ever coming on the scene, what we know now is that what the pandemic did is also really highlighted these cracks in the foundation of communities. And we deal with those here, even though sometimes people don't necessarily want to talk about them in a rural community. So one of the things that I've said from the very beginning, as far as the pandemic is concerned, is I'm not a medical professional. There's nothing about me that should be advising people on what to do regarding their health. However, at some point, local leaders just had to take it and kind of wrap their arms around it the best they could. And so that's what we're doing here in Weakley County is we're trying to get as much information from reliable sources, whether that's from the Tennessee Department of Health, whether that's the CDC, those sort of things, and disseminate that information on what is the best way to move forward through this time regarding the pandemic, citizens' health, the way they should start interacting with each other again, those sort of things. And then having these conversations around all these other things. And my job and what we try to do, sometimes the biggest part of my job is to just sit down and be quiet and to listen. That I don't necessarily have to be an active participant in every single conversation. What I do have to be an active participant in uh, is in the listening piece of it. Is understanding what people's perspective is, where that's coming from, potentially where they're going and what outcome they'd like to see. A lot of times when somebody has a conversation with me, especially if it's something that I either don't deal directly with or have a hard time kind of saying like, I can fix that is at the end of the day, if in a perfect world, if you could have anything, what would you like to see the outcome be in this situation? And let people tell you really what they want. And then you can say, as a local leader, of I don't know that I can deliver that, but I will certainly try and get us to a place that you're satisfied, as well as lots of other people are satisfied.
Now, obviously, I mean, you're knee deep in COVID right now and trying to deal with the crisis in the middle of it. What do you think are some of the long lasting effects that we're going to feel 5 and 10 years from now because of the COVID crisis?
Yeah, and I think that there are opportunities to both see good and bad. I refuse to use the term new normal. I say this is our current normal. This is the way that we got to work in the current situation that we're in. But I do not think that there's nothing about this that's normal. And so this is not new normal. I don't know that we'll ever see really buffets come back ever again. That's not necessarily a sad thing for me, but certainly that could be an opportunity that people are sad to see gone. What I do think, I hope that we come out of this with an understanding that that local leaders don't have all the answers, that at times you're going to have to extend them grace as they have made decisions. I think there will be some really interesting conversations about what role does the government have in day-to-day lives of people. I think that we're going to see long-lasting effects of that. I do think that the way that we educate, the way that we work, the way that we interact looks different. And again, some of that's not necessarily a bad thing. one of the biggest struggles I've always had is trying to be everywhere at once. And I may need to have a meeting in Middle Tennessee, and then at night be in an event in West Tennessee. And we've navigated that to the best of our ability. But now we see, like, I don't necessarily have to drive to Nashville for an hour meeting, that there is the possibility that I can sit in my office and have that interaction, and it be just as successful as if I were to be there in person, while also continuing to serve my constituents here at in the local community. But I will say, like, that is one of the things I miss the most is I don't love sitting in an office all day long, every single day. One of the things I've always loved about the job is the opportunity to be out and amongst people. And so I do miss that. I do hope that we get back to hugs and handshakes and high fives and all of those sort of things. But I think that for a period of time, we're going to be very leery of that. My hope is that we do see a vaccine, and that it is successful, and that this virus becomes much like the flu in the fact that it's manageable with therapeutics. But we're just not there today.
Something that we have in our here in West Tennessee that I know you're very involved in or have been in the past, that I'd love to hear you tell a little bit about is the Westar program. Can you, for a lot of people who've never even heard of that, can you tell us about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Westar is through the University of Tennessee at Martin, which we haven't really probably talked enough about, considering that it's right here in my backyard, and really kind of one of, if not the shining star of not just Weakley County, but of all of West Tennessee, and really kind of the generator for all success in some form or fashion in West Tennessee. But the University of Tennessee's got a leadership program called Westar. It's a West Tennessee leadership program that encompasses all 21 of the counties. So from all the way down to Shelby and river to river, has produced over 700 alumni, government, business, education, all kinds of areas of expertise, that then allows those community members to go out, see other communities. So it's approximately a 9-month program where participants go all throughout West Tennessee, look at communities, look at programming, look at opportunities, and then take that information back to their communities to make them a better place to live. And I just can't say enough great things about the work of Westar and the work that they've done over the last now 30 years since their inception, and the amount of great leadership that they've produced over that 30-year period has been just phenomenal.
Yeah, it's probably the thing people say to me the most is, "Oh, you should get involved in Westar and apply to be in the class." So, I'm really looking forward to doing that in the future when they, start back up post COVID.
Yeah, when they get back up.
Another thing that going on right now that I think has impact on both city and county and certainly federal government is the census, which in a normal year you would hear all about it. And as a person who's super into ancestry, I do understand the value of the census. But how does the numbers that come back on that, how does that impact city and county government?
Yeah, so the census plays a huge part in kind of what we do almost on a day-to-day basis for lots of different reasons. So the number one reason, and the thing that we point most directly to, is funding. So population and the population in both the county and the city in which you reside has a lot to do with the number of people that live there, and then the amount of those allocations. And so that's really important. We've seen that most especially in the last several months. So when you look at the money that the federal government sent to the state through the CARES Act, that then the state determined that they were going to send to the local governments, that allocation came to counties and cities based on their population. And that number came directly from the Census Bureau. And so that became really important when you start talking about money and how that money is going to get allocated. And you don't see that necessarily on the day to day, but certainly you saw that almost a direct correlation between your census number and the money you got as far as CARES Act was concerned. And so that makes it very finite. The other thing that we talk about is so both from a federal, state, and local level, the amount of representation and what that representation looks like is directly related to the census. So county commissioners are going to be tied to the number of people that live in a district. Your state representative and state senator are going to be tied to the number of people that live in their respective districts. And then obviously, Congressman Kustoff represents the 8th congressional district, and that is because of the amount of people that live in that district. And so we really also point to the fact that it's really important to have your voice be heard. And as rural communities do start to diminish in population, their voice also becomes diminished to some extent because there's just fewer people representing rural communities. And so we think that it's really important for people to participate in that so that that voice is heard loud and clear, whether that's in your local county commission or whether that's at the federal level in Congress.
With everything else going on, I haven't been paying attention to how it's going. Do they feel like the census is successful? Is being successful? One thing that I wondered, we're in an era where people try to trick you so often with junk mail and with emails, and I just wonder, are people hesitant to fill things out and mail them in now, thinking they're being tricked?
Yeah, I do think that there is almost an across the board distrust now of lots of different things. What we've tried to do again is get correct information out, to be very proactive about what that's going to look like. This year was the first time in the history of the census where individuals could go online and fill it out. We saw a lot of great self-reporting through the online service. Obviously you have the mail-in option. And then just like always, if you don't do those things, somebody's gonna try and maybe make multiple attempts to knock on your door and ask you the questions that are included in that census. And we're seeing that work being done right now. We've had a relatively successful census considering all of the things that we've kind of been up against in making that be successful. One of the things that's really interesting for Weakley County, and really any community that has a 4-year or an in-residence institution in their community is the fact that those college students really are counted in our census population count because it's technically where you are on April the 1st. So obviously a lot of those students went back home sometime in March because of COVID. They were asked to answer the census of where you would have been on April the 1st. The census also has done a lot of work with college campuses on determining what in residence would have looked like in April, potentially what students were not on campus residents but were in the community. And so there's been a lot of great work done by the Census Bureau and then by our 4-year institutions across the country on trying to get that correct information included in the count.
I had not thought of that, but that would absolutely impact things pretty dramatically, I would think. What I think what a lot of people don't really know or don't really understand is that folks like you do what you do because you want to serve the community. What can people like me who are members of the community do to make your job serving us easier?
So a couple of things. The number one thing is that we really do want people to be engaged in the conversation. We want people to participate in the process. We want to hear from citizens. whether that's on the situation that they've got on their road, or whether that's access to broadband, or whether that's how is your local teacher handling your child in the classroom. We want to hear from those people. I don't necessarily have to hear from all those people because I'm not in charge of all of those things. A lot of times people call and they ask questions, and then we point them in the right direction of, this is who you need to talk to about that. This is who handles that situation. But we do really think it's important for people to touch us in our office if they have a problem. We also love to hear the good stuff, the things that you think are going really well, or the things that, hey, this is working really great in my community. You all should think about doing it over here in this community, because I hear somebody's got that problem. But the other thing that we really would love to see, Scott, is this kind of investment in public service. I understand we've talked about today this, kind of divisive nature around communities and certainly around politics, but really and truly, it's important to be a part of that process. And we need good people doing that. I've got a great county commission. I work with a fantastic group of county elected officials. Every single mayor that we've got in Weakley County is fantastic when you look at the municipal mayors. But the thing that we need is more people involved in the process. We need people running for office. We need a more diverse group of citizens, whether that's diversity in age, in gender, in race, in profession. We need lots of different people sitting at the table having a conversation about what's good for our community. And that's something that we've been really passionate about over the last 6 years is getting more people interested in participating, whether that's school board, city board, county commission, or, kind of these other elected positions. We think that that's really important to be successful going forward, is having this broad conversation that's full of lots of different perspectives and voices.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your service to West Tennessee, and thank you for being on our podcast today.
I really enjoyed it, Scott. Thanks for the opportunity.
And thank you for working to get us more high-speed internet access.
I'm doing my dead level best.
Thank you for listening to Real Foot Forward. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Start planning your visit to Discovery Park of America by visiting discoveryparkofamerica.com. And also be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for the latest updates.